Yes, yes.
There we go. Hello and welcome to Lunar Alchemy. My name is John. This is Bella, as I'm sure you all know. Today we are discussing the transit of the sun through gate 28, and we're going to be talking about the shadow of purposelessness. Probably the most tongue-twisty of shadows amongst all of the gene keys. This seems to be a pretty kind of an intense shift from where we've been for a while. This is a transit moving out of the Libra, and now we're fully into the constellation of Scorpio, which means we're going to get dark and juicy and deadly. So I'm excited about what we get to explore today. So Bella, what comes to mind for you when you think about the shadow of purposelessness and this current moment in our transitory process?
For me, with the 28, I think that purposelessness can even be hard to grasp. Like, what is it? So I think I go back to what we were speaking about quite in the beginning of Lunar Alchemy. So many transits ago, when I was speaking about existential despair. That's a word I really love, a very scorpionic word. And that's what I feel the 28 is. Like when there is this existential despair or this soul pain or ache. And for me, that is purposelessness. When I feel like purposelessness is not something superficial, that you are doing a task, for example, you maybe have to send out all the emails after Lunar Alchemy so that people get the replay. That is not purposelessness. Like here we have a Scorpio energy that's very deep in the deep waters, and it has to do with, it's existential. It's part of the individual circuitry. So it's you with God. It's kind of you with existence, and there's nobody else. It's not about anything superficial, and it's not about something being boring. It's a very deep existential connection or disconnection is what I would say.
Interesting. Yeah, when I think about it, I mean the word itself, like, I think very rarely used by people. Purposelessness. People say purpose all the time. And in the particular area of self-exploration, self-realization, spiritual consideration, one of the maybe most popular things to talk about over at least the last 10 years is how to discover your purpose. And you can find any number of people who have made it their business to assist people with aligning with a purpose that is authentic to who they are, no matter what modality they're using to get to that, honing in on a purpose. It's extraordinarily important in today's experience, as humanity is kind of going through this shifting of no longer relating to menial tasks as lending a sense of purpose to one's existence. So I like the fact that you bring up this existential question, because in a world where our survival isn't being literally threatened every day by saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths and whatever it is, our modern brains have to do something with this genetic expression that says, hey, watch out, you're about to get eradicated. And in a society that's built on an archetypal level of tribal connection, that means you have to supply purpose for your existence, for the space that you take up amongst a planet of billions of humans, where there's the perception that there's too many of us to really support all of us at once. The idea that the abundance of the planet can't provide for everyone. So to me, like, looking at this fear is about looking at this sort of transition of that existential fear of, am I going to get eradicated, to the fear that I don't have a place within this existence to stop me from being pushed out from the tribe, the society, from, our own sense of egocentric value. And when we begin to look at that just within ourselves, not in relation to anyone else, from my perspective, we really start looking at those deep, dark, deep-seated fears that are always present, but almost never engaged with, because they tend to produce really messy results when at first they're engaged with. So, I mean, yeah, this one feels like it gets right to the bottom of what's driving a lot of our need to evolve in this world. I mean, even looking at the gene keys and doing lunar alchemy is, from a certain perspective, born out of the fear of purposelessness. Sort of an ironic paradox.
I feel like this week there is something a little bit different with purpose. I like what you said in the beginning. We're so often focused on purpose, and you have to have a purpose, and you have to go after your purpose. And that whole thing, even just going back to the gene key, like the purpose is something that is out there and that somebody's going to help you align with, or, there is something already off with that, because we are here in the splenic center. It's only in the now. Splenic center is intuition and instinct in the now. And if that's where purpose sits in the body graph, purpose is something in the now. And the way that we speak about the gift of totality and the city of immortality, it is that you're so alive in the moment so that nothing else exists. And it doesn't matter if you die the next moment, because you've lived fully in the now. And I feel like that's a bit of misunderstanding about purpose. We kind of go, and I have so many people coming to me saying, like, I want to find my purpose. I've been a parent now mostly for the last 15 years, and my kids are getting older, and I want to find my purpose. And I think that's it's a sign of a midlife crisis that happens, somewhere after 35, between 35 and 55, depending on how our lives look. And I don't think that the right question is, what's my purpose? Maybe the right question is, how can I do something so that I can feel completely alive and in the flow in the moment? Like, what is it what do I give myself to? What do I give my energy to? What is it that I respond to? And as I respond, because 70% of humanity is generators, as I respond, I feel regenerated, I feel alive, I feel vital. And that is probably more close to what purpose is. Purpose, when we look at the hologenetic profile, is in the very bottom of the chart, is our personality earth. There is no doing in that. It's a being. It's an anchoring into our core stability. It's it's the essence of who we are, but we don't need to do anything. So I feel like there is a little bit of a misunderstanding of this, like, seeking a purpose. The purpose is already there when we can stop distracting and looking for something to run after.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking about this in terms of the present moment, and in terms of how it functions through our system. Because as many people who follow human design or gene keys are aware, the human evolution is approaching this moment in time where the genetic expression can really be transformed into a new way of being, a new form of humanity. The 2027 evolution that's coming up. And when we're talking about finding one's purpose through what it is that you do, what we're looking at is the way that the human energy system is in a state of evolution, where in the human design system, we have root and sacral and solar plexus centers. We also have this same system in the vertical 7 major chakra yogic system. And a lot of the development of humanity has been centered on the expression that is being perceived and emanated through these first 3 chakras, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. And as many of you who may have studied this system would be aware, that solar plexus is like the generator of activity, the things that you do, and which tends to be driven by emotion. So they do relate to each other through these systems. But as we search for purpose through what it is that we do, depending on the frequencies that we're running through our system, we're either going to find ourselves in a situation where we're fulfilled in the present moment, or somehow we're still unfulfilled because the frequency is not running in harmony with our system. And so we may, go out into the world and say, oh, I found the secret to life. You just have to discover your purpose and do the right thing. And I found out that my purpose is to teach other people how to find their purpose. And a person having that experience may feel fulfilled while doing that. But what is going on there is a kind of an illusory perception of how the energy is moving through their system. They think it's because they're teaching other people how to find their purpose, but where in reality, their genetic and energetic structure is set up to guide people into greater aliveness in the present. That could be through discovering your purpose, or it could be a nature trail guide. Like you can fulfill that purpose through wildly different activities. And as humanity is moving through this sort of solar plexus, we have to do type of evolution, we're going to be, and I think it's been extraordinarily pervasive in the last 4 to 5 years. People are beginning to recognize the things that we're doing aren't necessarily meaningful or fulfilling for me. I need to figure out how to be so that no matter what I'm doing, I feel fulfilled. We're kind of evolving into this experience of being, and rather than just doing, is really impacting how we have this experience of the fear of death, which is what this fear of purposelessness is all about. So, well, I don't know why, I feel like somehow you have some like secret insight into, maybe it's not secret, but you have some special insight into the nature of Scorpio, and therefore the gene keys that happen through this particular aspect of the wheel. Like there's some qualities that you play in and play with. And I feel like not all people are drawn to get into this area of experience. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, and like what you find there, what attracts you to that space, and how it relates to this shadow and maybe into this gift frequency of totality that is kind of what we're developing through our systems right now.
Yeah, I feel your discernment, is valuable and correct. So if I go back to my astrology, the moon is a ruler of my chart, and it's a full moon in Scorpio. So that's kind of what rules my life. And then I have, together with that moon in my chart, I have Jupiter, which is the law, and the law of expansion for a human being. So it's really, and then moon is also like what I need, how I nurture. And for me, I feel like that's where I don't have a choice than to go there. And I also feel like when you have the ruler of your chart, when you have something really powerful in your chart, so it's my pearl in the Jane case, and it's my moon, you are going to know that full spectrum from the shadow to the city. It's going to be there in your life story. You're here to live out that imprint. And I would say a really good word for the 28 is intensity. That's why I'm saying this is the purposelessness. It's not about you being bored that you have to send out an email with a replay or something like that. I hear people like, oh, it's purposeless what I do now because I have to do so much admin. Yeah, maybe it can lead you to see what, where you're more alive, but there is something very, very deep here. And I see it and I feel it in all the Scorpio gates, because it's almost like if you don't have the whole spectrum, if I don't know what's there in the underworld, if I don't know all the archetypes, both the beautiful ones and the dark ones, like I've missed out on something. There is that polarity, I believe, and that meaning comes from depth somehow. And I can see that if you have a lot of Sagittarius, for example, there's a lot of optimism. You don't necessarily think that there is meaning in darkness, but Scorpio just has that. And then the polarity sign to Scorpius Taurus, and that has to do with worthiness and valuing yourself, and kind of creating a life that is sensual and beautiful. But it's almost like when you have those two on each side, you know that you can't do only that. Like with all the astrological signs, you look at both sides. So here we have the 28 in Scorpio, and the polarity point, or the programming partners, is the 27 in Taurus. It's all about nourishment. It's all about that responsibility to nurture the body, to nurture the form, to take care of yourself and the other in that sense. And there is something where I feel that the most dangerous part with the 28 is when we forget that Taurus part. We forget about the body. We forget about the nurturing. We forget that we are human in a way, and we go so deep into the archetypes so that we can drown in there somehow. And I had those periods of my life where I didn't feel human anymore. Like I wasn't some kind of existential pits, I don't know where. And I think that the balancing with the Scorpio is always Taurus, so that we also take care of the form, because I often feel like Scorpio is there's all the intensity, and the depth it doesn't really have like it doesn't end anywhere. Yeah. And I mean, like I guess the transformation is the key. I mean, to understand why the intensity, why the darkness. Well, it's transformation. Those are waters of transformation. You get stung by the Scorpio, you take the risk, and then you're reborn as something else. And the way that I see it is that you get born as who you truly are. And that's the whole thing with human design and gene keys, with embodiment practices. You can't live a false life anymore, because that's why we have Taurus. It doesn't matter if you have comfort, if you have beauty, if you have nurturing, if you have like the pleasure of the senses. If you're not you deeply in the waters of where you came from, then it doesn't feel good anyway.
Yeah. So this kind of brings up an interesting personal geometry between us, which is that my moon is in Taurus. And, that, as a mirror of what you're describing, that means that I, in a way, don't have a choice about seeking out that nourishment, that comfort, and that sense of stability in well-being, which ironically, if you go so deeply in that direction, rather than not feeling like a human being as you're describing, one can become so like extremely tied to the experience of being a human that every little thing that is uncomfortable, that gives you a sense of discomfort, is a source of extraordinary suffering. And which can drive you to almost do anything to rise above that experience of human suffering and spend a little bit of time being a little bit not human. And that kind of brings me to at least one side of this shadow, which is the reactive nature of purposelessness. In the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd defines it as the gambler. You know, in the 64 Doors, you talk about the daredevil. I like to think about this archetype as like it's like a forceful attempt to create an experience of you know, it's like you're pushing against the outside world to force it to provide for you that which is going to give meaning to your experience of the vast void of possibilities that is life. You know, you're looking at the void in this fear of saying, I'm never going to have enough. I'm never going to have the right partner. I'm never going to get to do the things that I want to do in my life. I'm never going to be free of the suffering that I have. So in order to force the world to give up to me what it is that I need to not have to be facing this void of possibility, you know, to make everything okay, I'm going to do something extreme that it can't ignore. So, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, you don't have to be in a casino to be taking risks in this manner. And, you know, taking risks isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a way, from the way I see it in this gene key, a particular way of relating to the activity that naturally wants to be expressed through us. And when you combine that lower frequency of fear of that void of death, along with your, you know, expressive nature that wants to come into the world, it's like you've got to either do something or you've got to live with the reality that you're empty inside. There's no meaning.
Yeah. I think with the 28, it's not necessarily, and that's, you're also not pointing to that, it's not necessarily physical risk taking, because Scorpio, like we know, is existential risk taking. And it has to do with transformation. So if it's not transformation you want, I mean, I think I'm thinking of somebody I know who drives motorcycles and goes really fast in places where it's really dangerous in the mountains. And I do feel like there is an experience there of feeling alive. It's not simply like wanting to die. I mean, that would be the shadow frequency. And I can see how the 28 can kind of get stuck. I remember when I was traveling so much a few years ago, and it had become like my way of living. And I think I have the sun in Taurus. So I think my son was saying, well, you're never in one place comfortable. You're always out there. And it had become this explanation. Almost my mind was saying, well, it's worth it to go there because you're gonna experience so much. You know, it's worth to, and it was that, I guess, with the sun and the moon that are kind of pulling on you. I think that the 28 can kind of, like you say, in the shadow frequency that is reactive, it can kind of go into a dynamic or a pattern where it thinks it needs to live so much, because if it hasn't, it's not going to have all the experiences that it wanted to have before it dies. So it's that fear of not living, and then you have to live it. But I also admire people that go to places where they feel very alive, and sometimes that isn't completely safe. But I think that it's more about an existential purpose again than something that's very physical in Scorpio. The physical side is more in the Taurus polarity.
Yeah, like I was thinking about how does this dynamic relate to our energy system? And as you were mentioning, of course, this gate exists in the spleen, which, from an energetic biological standpoint, is very much related to the solar plexus. That solar plexus encompasses a large number of organs that are all in there. The stomach, the spleen, the liver, the pancreas, there's all this stuff going on there. And, I was thinking about what drives a person to become, like you were kind of saying in relationship to the menial tasks of life. It's not really about the tasks that you're doing or the activities that you're doing. It's about how you're doing it. So if you're driving fast on a motorcycle, are you doing it with this low frequency fear driving you to an extreme, or are you doing it for the sheer joy of the wind in your hair or whatever it is? And when a human being, the difference between those two ways of being is pretty large in terms of how our awareness functions. How does our consciousness function? If we're talking about safety, what are the things that need to be in place in order to be safe? Well, is a person going 80 miles an hour on a motorcycle safe? I mean, we can look at it from a statistical standpoint and say, well, absolutely not, because of the percentage of people that, have pretty huge mishaps going at that speed. However, how do you account for the percentage of people that don't? How is it that they get through that experience safely? And, this could be applied to any level of experience, not just physical safety, but emotional safety. And when I think about where does that emotional safety spring from, it really comes from the expression of our hearts in this world. What are we drawn to through our hearts that makes us feel alive? This is like the kind of like, if you do have somebody guiding you into how to discover your purpose, one of the first pieces of advice is, well, you've got to look deep inside your heart to know what's going to drive you, what's going to make you feel alive. What are the experiences that you've had that put some pep in your step? And so when I think about that, this experience of safety around the heart really brings, even these sides of the shadow, the repressive and the reactive, hollowness and gambling, it speaks directly to how we experience our hearts. Have you ever known somebody who is seeking love in such a desperate way that they'll kind of run out and profess their love for somebody, just in the hopes that that person might receive that and respond positively to it, or have you met somebody who is so devoid of joy in their life that they just seem completely hollow in themselves? It's like they've got a hollow chest. They can't really be happy for you or anybody else because there's nothing in there. Well, of course there's something in there, but doesn't feel that way, does it? So, So Bella, I'm curious how you see, as we go through these solar transits, we get 5 or 6 days with each of these particular gates, and it progresses through each of the lines. What do you see as like the arc of this particular shadow experience, and maybe bringing in this gift of totality? What do you see in terms of an arc of transition as we move through this?
I think I would like to show the charts to give a little bit of practical.
Yeah, I think I got you set up there.
It still says that I have.
Oh, there you go.
See if I don't have it. Okay. Perfect. So what we have been speaking about today is this polarity, or this opposition, Taurus on one side and Scorpio on the other side. And the programming partners we're speaking about was the 27th and the 28th. And when I think about progression, and I often see the wheel and not just one gate. So what I'm thinking of when we're here is that when Richard Rudd speaks about the 7-year deconditioning process, he starts in the 3, which is the eternal child, and then we go through the whole wheel, and the 50 is the midpoint. So if we think about the 28, it's the first gate that comes after the midpoint and the 50. So what's the midpoint? In human design, we say that we're living a lot from our not self, which is the conditioned self. So we are becoming aware of that self through all these gates, of becoming aware of ourselves and peeling the layers of the onion. And then here in 50, we can say that's 3.5 years. If we speak about the 7-year journey, that's when half of our cells have changed and are vibrating in a higher frequency. So suddenly you come over that critical mass, that point where more of your cells are resonating as your true self than as your not self. And the first gate after that midpoint is the 28, and it is that leap, because it's a new way of living. So we could speak about it as the leap from being anchored in the shadow frequency to being anchored in the gift. That doesn't mean, like we said before, that you're never going to feel anything else than that frequency. You're always going to have the whole frequency band, but there is like a stability where you are in the gift. That's your pathway, and then you experience the other frequencies. So for me, in that sense, I believe that the 28 is that transformation to live in a higher frequency that includes the courage to face anything that isn't on purpose, anything that doesn't feel aligned, alive. Yeah, and it comes after the 50 is it's about balance and harmony. So yeah, I think there is also discernment that is greater than any time before in the wheel. Whether we speak about it, we go with the sun as we do here, or you think about it in your own deconditioning process. And that's also when you're going to align in this new harmony, in this new frequency. That's when we continue in the gate in just 2 days or 1.5 days in the 44, which is you're going to create new constellations with new beings that are also vibrating in a similar frequency. So it's being able to actually attract and work with other people with a similar purpose, with a similar vision, people that are in your fractal line. And that's all happening here. And it's powerful and transformative after we have deconditioned a lot of those, a lot of the pressure to live as who we are not.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what that makes me think about is this gift frequency of totality. How do we, when it's sort of like sets up gene key 28 as like the ultimate shadow worker, the ability to look so deeply within that there is no aspect of self that remains in a state of denial or rejection. And when that totality becomes embraced, what happens is you have the opportunity to unlock all of these gifts that are essentially your genetic birthright, that are living within you but may not yet be expressed. And once those gifts are unlocked, even if they're not unlocked, even if you're just living deeply in those shadows, you're going to attract into your life the people that resonate with those frequencies. But when you unlock those gifts, you're going to find that rather than attracting people into your life to sort of push you and poke you in the sore spots, you're going to attract people who reflect to you the brightness of your being and who are inspired by how it is you do or what it is you do, or just how it is that you're being. And that may be simply through enjoyment of togetherness. It might be appreciation for services that you perform. There's any number of ways that this can come up, but once those underlying hidden aspects become reabsorbed into the totality of who you are, now you've entered into this field where you can access the space of no time. When you are talking about the present moment is really the only way that you can access endless time. And because that's at the heart of every understanding of time that suggests that linear time is an illusion. It's that the only time that exists is now. And when you're connected with that, you're in that 0 point where the quantum field is accessible to you. When you're in a linear process, you have no access to the quantum field because you are constantly anticipating or constantly rehashing what is before you or behind you. When you're in that present moment of now the quantum field opens up to you where the true nature of relationship can be expressed, which is not of necessarily of, we can look at it from our singular localized perspective and see cause and effect. But really, if you look at cause and effect from the space of no time, they are simultaneous, which suggests entanglement rather than sequence. And when you have entanglement, that means that what is born within you is born outside of you as well. And it really opens up this possibility of, human expression in the world that is very rare to see in a human being, but I believe that's where we're headed. And in a way, I sort of can't wait for Gene Key 28 to like really dawn massively across humanity, because what you'll end up seeing is all the casinos will go out of business, not because nobody goes there, but because everybody goes there and the house always loses. Because nobody will go to gamble. They'll all go from this standpoint of heart-centered equanimity with who and what they are. And the truth of what that is prosperity. And so you won't go to a casino and lose money. You'll only go there and experience prosperity. And the casinos will be forced out of business. I mean, it just seems like a hilarious possibility to me.
Yeah.
Bella, what are your thoughts about all of this?
I think it goes back to what you were saying before. I think it's an acceptance that starts once you become a little older, that not everybody has this as their, it's not my life's work, but that's what I would say, like norm, if we don't think about the gene keys, like if this is my life's work, if this is what I do, there is the acceptance and the understanding that not everybody's wired that way. And that doesn't mean that they don't love me. That doesn't mean that there is something wrong with me or with them, but everyone doesn't have this yearning to go that deep and to be in that transformation. And if I don't make myself wrong for that or them wrong for that, then I think then I can see, if I can see the purpose in the beauty of everybody being who they are in the moment, in all the colors and nuances. I think that's because it can be, I think that there can be judgment on both sides. How if you are doing a lot of shadow work, other people can judge that to be like, oh, why so much suffering, why so much darkness? Or if you are in this world and you see how fertile the soil is and how much transformation there is, you become arrogant in that sense and be like, why are the people that don't understand the importance of this? And there is just something here where I think it's important to understand that 28 is individual circuitry. So it is about your existence. It is about your life. And it is about the 32, which is the programming partner. Like, what's your illusion in a way? What's your reality? I would say more than anything. What are you preserving for you? What is important for you? What do you want to bring on to the next generation? And we all have different things to bring on. So if depth and transformation are keywords of what I am bringing to the next generation, other people might have, very different things. So that's what I feel, to not have. And sometimes that's where true equanimity, I think, is when you don't have a preference anymore, where you don't have to impose your truth on anybody else's truth. That felt important.
Yeah, I think it is definitely important to look at the just the way, especially when we have these personal gates, to look at how the activation or the illumination of this particular gate affects the transpersonal experience. How because as you were suggesting, when we focus inwardly, we can discover all sorts of treasures, But if we don't allow for other people to be what they are and in their process, that inward focus will hold you into those lower frequency expressions and sort of divert you into some of these other shadows, like you mentioned, of arrogance, or, you know, there's it's like the inherent traps of the spiritual journey, where the spiritual ego can sort of take over your entire process and completely derail you from self-realization without you ever realizing it. And when you don't consider total otherness, from this totality of embracing all that is, all that exists within and all that exists without, then our inward process is maybe going to generate resistance to connection with others, rather than generating that attraction of resonance with others. So I definitely agree, like, really important point. So Lunar Alchemy is this discussion of our shadow aspects in relationship to the cosmos. The sun shines its light on the moon, and the moon is a part of us. Bella was talking about her moon in Scorpio, opposite my moon in Taurus. And the moon is one of the primary driving factors of our human experience as a physical being, as an emotional being, primarily. And it is often looked at as the sort of, it influences or controls our relationship with our subconscious material. So when we're looking at the light of the moon, we're really examining what's underneath the surface of who we think we are with our conscious minds. And that really speaks to this particular gene key, embracing the darkness. It's not dark under there because it's evil. It's dark because the light of our awareness just hasn't penetrated to that place yet. And, one of the sayings that is prevalent in society is there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And, what it says is that there's light ahead. You just have to keep going a little further, and the darkness you'll come out of the darkness. So, like, if you're moving through a stage of darkness, that it can be tempting to hope for the light ahead. But this particular gene key, I think, suggests that the light isn't really ever ahead, it's within. And when we go within, we're bringing light into the dark spaces. So even if there is a process of suffering going on as we encounter these unexplored parts of self, that's part of the process of bringing our awareness into those spaces. And, maybe we don't have access to experiencing the joy of the gifts that we're helping to uncover in that moment, but the process is happening. And if you remain present with yourself, that awareness of your transformative power with yourself is truly ever present. So that's kind of kind of the thing that I would like to say, for everyone watching on Facebook, this is really what Lunar Alchemy is about, is helping to bring about more awareness of this inner process, so that if you're on a path, you're in this 7-year window where you're, 2 years in or something, and you're starting to notice all this stuff is coming up, or you're in some other process of deconditioning where you're really kind of trudging through the mud, where you feel totally surrounded by challenges and attacked from outside of you, and you feel all of your weaknesses are on display and raw, and this process of discussion and energetic transmission is about opening up the space so that the light of your awareness can generate that transformation in a faster way. That's what the tool of contemplation is about in the Gene Keys. It's about accelerating evolution. And that's what we're doing here. So if you're watching on Facebook and would love to join us for our quantum healing transmission around each week's solar transit reflected from the moon, illuminating our shadows, you can click. I think I posted the link down beneath there, so you can join us there. And feel free to join us next week. We'll be here at the same time every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a future session. Thank you for joining us, and we will now continue with our solar members. So we'll see you next time.